So
It's been months.
it's been months since we last spoke.
Yes.
What's been going on?
We can say last year.
Yes, because we were planning for the beginning of the year, right?
Very confident that 2023 we were super busy.
Yes, it was so crazy. 2023 was also a really weird. When is it not a weird time, I think, for anyone? I was talking to someone actually this morning about because they were like sharing their journey and like all the growth that they've experienced and how exciting it is for them, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, like I'm on this journey." And then I'm like, "But are we not? Like, we're always on a journey, though." That's like the beauty that I feel like we should not have. I guess we should have an end goal for specific things, but when it comes to like our life and our time walking this timeline, it should just be ongoing. Like we should never have. So I find myself saying so often here, like, "Oh, I'm on this journey. I'm on this journey." And I'm like, I'm on a lot of journeys, but no, I'm like on this consistent journey of like growth and evolution. And I feel like that's what it should be. Don't you think?
Yes, yes, yes. Life has been so busy, but I think we all have the one, I don't want to say goal, but the one endpoint where we're trying to go. And it
Yeah.
goes comes in different directions, but the endpoint it's always sometimes the same. Most of the time it's the same.
I guess the fun part of it all, the process is like the different routes that sometimes you have to take to finally let it sink in. There's like learning lessons that I finally get to, and I'm like, oh, like it's not the first time that I've encountered that, or it's not the first time that maybe somebody like said X, Y, and Z, but it doesn't sink in for me until I go through those actual like life experiences and learning lessons and trials and errors, and you know what I mean? And then eventually you're like, oh, that's what that person was saying. Yeah, I get it. I get it. It took me 3 years to get here, but I get it.
Definitely. Yes.
But you have been super busy.
Yes.
So
Yes.
can you kind of catch us up on what's been going on?
Of course, my group practice with my associates, it's been busy, thriving, very grateful for that. I'm going to school, I'm going to be a doctora. I'm going to be finishing school by August, doing my oral defense on July. So there's a lot of pressure adding to that, putting all things together, analyzing some data of the stuff that I'm doing because I'm doing so I did a scoping review, a research on HIV undocumented Latinx individuals, of course, the systematic barriers. So with that, I created a taller educacional where I went to Mecca last week, presented my workshop about HIV, why people are not talking about it, especially in our communities, if we think about these intersections that I'm bringing in, being undocumented, being Latino, Latina, Latinx, not knowing the language. So it's a lot of things. The assumption that HIV is AIDS and it's only happening to the LGBTQ community. So as a cis individual, heterosexual individual, I'm not going to have or being exposed to HIV. So breaking all the stigmas, all these barriers where we need to get tested, we need to talk about prevention. So it's been beautiful to see the other end where people are very perceptive, like receiving the message, wanting to know more. So it's not that our communities don't want to talk about it. We just need to learn how to bring up these topics, how to connect and collaborate, because my main collaboration is with the promotoras, that we don't talk too much about them, but the beautiful work that they do with the communities and how much the community trusts them.
Yeah.
Because the support that they bring in. So a big partnership with Promotoras de Unidas por Salud up in Mecca has really opened this opportunity to talk about more about my workshop, collect data. So it's almost done and it's been amazing. But I'm also a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a friend, a daughter. So trying to manage, all my different hats, trying to be present as much as I can. But I've been really busy. I feel emotionally exhausted. I think I'm really drained because even though it's been a beautiful journey, I could still see the own barriers, that I experience because of my skin color, because being an immigrant, being a woman, language issue, where Spanish first language. So I get to sit with that as well. And I have so much to talk about that. But I think, I will talk about it once I'm done because I don't want to jeopardize the work that I'm doing right now. But
Yeah.
it's upsetting to see that 2024 I still face racism, discrimination, and people talking to me like I don't have no value, no worth. So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep that in check, mental note taken. But when it's time, when the time is appropriate, I definitely want to address it and say some things about that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's so funny how many people, even within our own community, don't realize that these challenges exist or they don't want to validate them, and they los tratan así like, ay, everything is about race with you, or everything's about gender, or everything's about disadvantages to certain groups and privilege and blah, blah, blah. But like they do exist. So it does get exhausting to even have to hear it. And I bring this up because I was away for like a month. I went to Michigan to visit family. And this is like upper Michigan. We had a great time. So like the area was beautiful. We were near water, which is non-existent here in this part of Texas where I'm in. So it was like beautiful weather, beautiful, just the surroundings. Like I said, water. The people were very friendly, very kind, very friendly. But it's like 90 something percent white people up there. I mean, we stuck out like a sore thumb, right? I didn't necessarily express it with a lot of people there because it was just a lot of me taking stuff in and observing it and like kind of like processing it. But even though everybody was really, really kind, because they were, and we had a good time, I still had difficulties relating to some people. Very well been a lot of it on my part, right? Like resistance of like, can I be myself here? Can I open up about certain things? So I think a lot of it was probably like my own stuff coming up. But the truth of the matter is that if I had been completely open in some spaces, I would have gotten some type of look. I would have gotten some type of like, you don't behave like that. And then I think immediately what comes together with that is like, oh, it's because she's this culture or she's this type of person. It came up for me more, even though I did not have, and it's such a bizarre way to even talk about it because I didn't necessarily have a bad experience. I didn't have anybody like in my face about something disrespectful. I did not. I love
You were mindful about who you are.
very, which is really sad because that was in the back of my head. And again, I'm taking accountability for the fact that that was my own junk, but it doesn't come without reason though. You know what I mean? Because it's very, when I talk about prejudice and racism and I tell people there's different types of racism and different types of prejudice. And there's racism, which I think what everybody, when people talk about racism, I think generally your prejudice, they think of that, the type in your face, like aggressive, blunt, ugly, gross in your face, right? But there is such a thing as very subtle, even the other person giving it, right, is unaware of their own prejudice, I feel. And so I think that that's what I was like very, like lo traía muy a conciencia, that that's probably the type of prejudice that exists in that area. And it's probably out of like ignorance because they're maybe not necessarily too exposed to people that don't look like them. So, I'm not to say that they weren't kind, but I'm just different. And so I was very aware of that. And that was really tricky. But this to say, with what you were sharing, it's 2024 and I'm still feeling some of that. So I can't even imagine you in a world of professionals that probably without even realizing feel like they are better than you in some ways.
Yes, and it happens all the time, unfortunately, in a very passive. It happens from your own community, which is sometimes
Yes.
even more disturbing. Like, okay, but I think it has become such a normal thing that we just accept it, and don't talk about it. We ignore it because if we do, we're the bad person. We're just very problematic.
Oh my gosh, that's the word. Like you are problematic. You are looking at the negative. You're the one seeking the problem here. Nobody's saying anything. And it's so dismissive.
Yes. But like I said, it's a lot of things that I want to do about this, but I'm keeping myself together, not saying much because I really want to graduate. I want to be done with stuff. I have so many things going on that I want to be able to accomplish because it impacts, unfortunately, it impacts the way people are going to see you and they're going to question something. So I
Hmm.
want to prepare, be done with everything, fully represent myself, not represent the school that I'm going to or the work that I'm just waiting for that moment to come.
More of
So
a freedom, right? To be like,
it's because I think my experience, I'm not the only one that is going through this. Imagine other people, other students having similar experiences. So it's a good topic that I've been trying to really write things about, talk about, but I will do it when the time is right.
and I hope you do get that time, because I think the sad part about this is that you recognize that you have to find the time, the proper time, the right circumstances, you know what I mean, the right platform, the right space. That in itself is still sad, but you just do what you got to do and
Yep,
you just ride with it. But
definitely.
we are going to be doing a series with you, because I think, again, even though it's 2024, you cannot ever continue to stress enough things about mental health, mental wellness, healing, inner healing, understanding yourself, and just all of it to be better for you. And
Mhm.
so this is a reason that you came with to me and was like, what if we do a series? Which I already wanted to anyway. And I thought that was great. So I'm going to just kind of open up the space for you to bring forward whatever topic you feel, especially with the career you're in and dealing with people, what you probably see the most of, or like things that are lacking and that you'd like to discuss and bring to the floor right now.
Yeah, I think we decide to start with mental health and religion. Healing, it's beautiful, but there's a lot of pushback when people say things like, I'm just going to pray about it, or I'm going to talk to my pastor, or you're living through a lens that is not allowing you to heal in different forms. And I think my first experience with that was when I became a therapist with my mom. Is like, well, I don't need therapy. I just need to go to church. I just need to pray. Necesito ayunar. And I was like,
It's like ingrained in a lot of people's head, because that's the same thing that I get with, specific people in my family, where it's like nobody wants to rip you of your faith, or strip you of your faith. Nobody wants to rip you away from your beliefs, but girlfriend, you need help as well here.
definitely, because, there's such a thin lines when we talk about mental health and the diversity of the diagnosis, because I heard people where I have people that are come with a diagnosis of schizophrenia, hallucinations, they come with this trauma where my mom says, I've been possessed. There's a demon inside of me because of my hallucinations that I have opened my mind to the dark world, and I understand that. And yes, I do believe on all of those things as
There
well,
is a spiritual world, yes.
but both of them could coexist.
Yes.
Both of them could, I mean, if you're praying, and I'm not negando, your faith, it is important, but it's also important to address some things that are out of your control that you have no knowledge about. And that's when therapy really comes into place. So there's so many stigmas and so many misconceptions about mental health and the type of work that you want to do. I remember people were not open about doing yoga because if you put your mind in blank, and if you're this state of mind that you're opening yourself to the devil to come in and take over, so even as little as like mindful exercising could be very rejected from people that
Hmm.
are very connected to their religion. As they come to my practice, I definitely encourage them, go to church. Praying is your coping skill, keep praying, but we
Yeah.
also add other coping skills that is going to help you, a little bit more. It's a combination of everything. You know, it's not just therapy or it's not just praying. It's a combination of a lot of things of your support system that is going to help you heal. Because there's a lot of trauma with that. There's a lot of trauma. And we can go into different topics where we talk about the LGBTQ community, when we talk about single moms, you know, or coming from a family with a lot of violence, and how the drastic change with religion. So I don't know, what are some things that are coming up for you?
Oh my gosh, I feel like you're hitting every point because and it's hard to choose just one, but just to touch on some of them, for instance, like when it comes to like yoga and therapy and just exercises or different practices to kind of help your mind, be at ease and your body to feel calm and rested. That is a big taboo. That's a big no-no, specifically in the type of religion that I grew up with, or that I grew up in, which I believe is probably, from what you're saying, similar to yours, because we grew up in a Protestant church, but it was like los evangélicos, right? Pero los hispanos evangélicos, I think just evangelicals in general are very extreme, no matter where you come from. But talking specifically about the Hispanic evangelical church, everything is a sin. Everything. Watching TV for a lot of people was a sin. Thank God that was not one of the things that we practice, because I would have died without being able to like watch something on TV. But a lot of people can't watch TV because the devil gets to you through that, right? A lot of people can't go to the theater, much less, because that's troublesome. A lot of people couldn't even watch like movies like Harry Potter because it talks about witchery and witchcraft and wizards and blah, blah, blah. And that's going to influence your mind. So the trauma that religion brings when it comes to just practices that are of that they don't understand. They're not even necessarily of the unknown, like the occult, but just because they don't understand them, and to them in their mind, it looks like witchcraft, or it looks like you're allowing your mind to be taken control of. That's an immediate, like, no, it gets shut down very quickly.
And they're forcing you to stop connecting to your ancestors. For me, growing up, and my mom is Christian, she's hardcore Christian, and I have learned to set boundaries with her. But to have Palo Santo or sage or incienso at home, it was really bad. I would get in trouble for that. So I had to relearn things that belong to me, belong to my culture as an adult, because they were prohibited for me. I wasn't able to do any of that. I wasn't able to wear any makeup. I wasn't able to paint my nails. So those are things that I learned as an adult. And even as I was able to learn those things, it was very, las mujeres de casa no se pintan.
Oh my, I know, because if you do, guess what? You're probably a whore. Right? Like that's that. And I think with that, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is why my problem with organized religion, and specifically, again, the religion that I grew up in, this is why I have a problem with it. Sometimes when I talk about it, and I say this so much on here, people think I am at war with God, or that I oppose God, or that I oppose the spiritual realm. I do not. My faith is very grounded and connected to this higher being. I believe in God. My problem is that for churches like the one that you probably grew up in and myself, is that it's highly influenced by machismo. Yes. And so a lot of the things are really created, all these rules are created, the majority of them with a desire to control, and even further, a desire to control women. To have a man in power and have the whole church be submissive, under him, specifically women. So therefore, anything that you do outside of that, you're a whore. You're easy. Eres fácil, eres de la calle, blah, blah, blah. Even to disagree with something and question it out of genuine curiosity, it's automatically, you're problematic. Somebody needs to like hold a tight rein on you, because you're probably going to end up on the street selling your body. Like everything goes to that.
Yes.
It is very drastic. It's very like, whoa, I just had this one simple question and I thought that as my spiritual leader, I could come to you and ask. All of a sudden I'm the problem and I you need to shut up and just know what your place is.
So if you don't fit into this box, then we have all these problems nowadays where kids are not talking about being molested. Kids don't talk about with their parents because those conversations does not fit into this box. So I'm just going to deal with it on my own way.
Yeah.
And then we have healthy and coping skills where kids are using drugs, are having unsafe sex, have no autonomy over their body, and they think whatever it is that they're doing is the right way to do it. They're growing up into very toxic relationships because they don't have a very good example of what a healthy relationship is. To
Mhm.
me, and that's just my own opinion, having a religion is living under fear, because if you don't do what the Bible or what your church or your faith is telling you to do, then you're going to end up in hell. And hell is
Yeah.
such a really nasty, painful place. So growing up with all those things where if I love my best friend, then and I'm gay, then I'm going to go to hell. If I want to explore my sexuality and be open about, being more sex positive, I'm going to go to hell. If I become a single mom, I'm going to go to hell. So they have this specific box, very tight, very black and white. So as we grow under that lens, that umbrella, and then you become an adult and you want to liberate yourself, of course, we're not going to do it in the best way.
Right,
There's no-
cuz now you're like it's almost like you're so desperate to be free to have these, by the way, very normal experiences, right?
Mhm.
Like sexuality is a it's a God-given thing. It's so funny that like they're very normal and they don't offer the spaces to have healthy conversations about them so that kids or young adults or even adults maybe for the first time are having them, and they can have healthy conversations that are going to be an actual guide to a really positive, beautiful way of living. Instead, it's like, don't do that. Don't,
Mhm.
nobody, good girls and good Christian people do not talk about sex. And you're like, okay, well then they're having sex. I mean, you know what I mean? So it's so crazy to me that all these things that are normal don't find a free space within what's supposed to be a safe space, right? To get guidance and advice and teachings. It's not allowed. And so you just literally, you're like a robot. You just go and you just sit and you learn to like self sabotage, because if you happen to have curiosity about anything, you're already telling yourself, oh my gosh, God hates me. I'm going to go to hell because how dare my thoughts that I have no control over all of a sudden come to me and I think these things, right? Or I'm wondering about this and I'm wondering about that. So you're just a robot who's living in constant fear.
Mhm.
And like you said, the moment you are given the chance, you're going to explore it,
Yeah.
period.
And
And
let's
not in a healthy way.
talk about numbers, because I think statistics, it's going to prove that there's something missing, that there's a gap. Latinx communities, one of the highest rate of, teen moms, substance use problems, HIV positive. We keep getting HIV infections because of the lack of positive sex education, a lot of dropouts, a lot of alcohol use, a lot of moms that are Latinx that are domestic violence survivors, sexual assault survivors. So the numbers are not lying to us. So when these conversations are not happening, there needs to be a balance. Yes, I have faith, I believe in the higher power, I believe in the universe, I believe in my ancestors. But I need to find a balance where it's not only those lenses that I have to live my word. If I need to go to the doctor, I need to see the doctor and seek for support with my doctor. The same thing with the therapist, but because we believe that only this person, our pastor, our priest, is the one that's going to give us all the answers, then we're not seeking for other options. Our children, our teenagers, our young adults are going through.
Yeah.
And what's the after picture? No contact with the family. There's a lot of homelessness, There's a lot of sex trafficking in our teens because they just want to escape the environment that they're growing up with, that they don't like it. And it's about just normalizing conversations. It's
That's
about
it.
allowing them just to express themselves. And how do we find the balance? Curiosity, it's part of growing up. We have.
Yeah. I know talking to your children about sex is uncomfortable. It's just uncomfortable, right? But if you're not going to teach them, somebody else will. The best advice that my mom ever gave me when I was pregnant with my first daughter. And then you start to question everything because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be responsible for this human being. Am I ready? What if I screw up? Which you will. If you don't have any kids and you plan on having, you will screw up. But the best advice she ever gave me was don't ever put anything past your children. Expect the best from them in terms of like, believe them when they say whatever, right? Like celebrate their strengths, celebrate their accomplishments, speak life into them, of course. But in the end, they are human. Y los humanos erramos. Like you will never, I don't care how much you think your child is a perfect angel. Your child is a human being who will screw up majorly. And so she said, like, don't ever put anything past them. And it's uncomfortable to talk to your children about sex because you're thinking, oh, no, my daughter would never. My son would never. Yes, they would. If you did, so will they. So this is our opportunity, this generation of parents specifically, right? Like talking about the Latinx community. We struggled to find those safe spaces and we learned. And a lot of times we learn the wrong way, right? And things didn't go well. But then we can do that for our children. Like the thoughts you had as a teenager, they're having them. Like that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And your priest and your preacher and your spiritual, person, leader, they also have them. So why not just talk about it?
Like you said, it's hard. It's difficult because we're not, especially, with the Latinx community, we don't talk about it. My
Yeah.
mom never had a sex conversation with me. I was a single mom. I learned on my own, because they just don't do it because you're going to go to hell. And if you ever get pregnant, I will never talk to you. You will get kicked out of the house, this and that. And I'm like, oh my God. Now here I was, 22 and pregnant, trying to find the
Fearing.
courage to tell my mom I'm actually pregnant. Like, I need help. I need support because I wasn't living in California. I was in Puerto Rico back then. So for my mom, it was such a shameful thing. Now that I think about it, it's like I have no pictures of my pregnancy because it was very secretive. Like, don't tell anyone. Oh, yeah, Muriel está embarazada. Yeah, but shh. And I was
We don't
like,
talk about that. Yeah.
I'm like, but I'm 22.
Right.
I
And
wasn't even like 16 or 17, so I cannot imagine the shame and the
someone
guilt
younger.
teenagers going through as
I
they're
know.
experiencing, being pregnant.
And you know what? Like, as a mom, and correct me if I'm wrong, to say those things now and remember that, right? And to see your child now and think like, but why was this a secret? Why was this beautiful thing that was happening to me and that was coming into the world such a big deal? You know what I mean? In a negative way. It was a big deal in a beautiful way, but why does it have to be a big deal in a negative way? And like, we don't have the spaces for that.
We don't. A lot of these things, if I talk, a little bit of self-disclosing, I don't want to have more kids because of my first experience having a child. Because a lot of people say, well, your kid is 15, you should have I was like, no. My experience was horrible. I don't even recall my baby shower. I just knew I had one.
Yeah. You were just kind of like on autopilot going through the motions.
And there were so many rules. Like, you need to go back to church. And I was like, but I want to go back to school because I was studying in Puerto Rico. And I was like, no, I want to go back to school. And I'm going to work because if I don't work and I just go to church, I have to live under your rules. And I have not changed. I still feel the same way about my beliefs, my views of the world. So it was a lot. So when I think about it and when I talk to my teenagers, my clients, my kids, it's like, have your parents talked to you about sex and positive sex and protecting yourself. What's appropriate, what's not appropriate.
Yeah.
As you're dating, who are you dating? And a lot of people
Please.
will be like, oh, you cannot talk to them about that in therapy. Oh, yes, I can. Definitely. Especially here in
Yeah.
California, 12 and older, they have the right to request their own therapy services. They don't need a parent consent. So I'm going to have these conversations. Of course, they're going to be between my scope of practice, living skills, healthy choices versus bad choices, and where all these things are coming from. So we need to find ways to create these conversations and normalizing, because some of them might become parents at some point.
Like what we were saying right now, kids are going to find out on their own, right? And so the ones that get to have these discussions with you within your practice as your clients, because they are obviously like, it's something they're struggling with and they're like wanting to bring it out in the open. How lucky are they that they have an adult who is safe, right, to have these conversations with them, who's not going to persuade them one way or another, who's just going to give them factual, safe information. But not everyone has that opportunity. They're going to be learning from like their middle school best friend. They're going to be learning from maybe like their crush who's trying to manipulate them into doing things. And you know what I mean? So like, I don't care how wonderful your children are. They are having these curiosities. They're having these conversations. I'm so bad at this, Muriel, because I have all this like little information in my brain and I could never recall where I heard it from, who I heard it from. But I know I heard it and I read it somewhere. But I read that like there was like I guess like a survey or study happening, and people in Europe, I can't remember exactly which country, but Europe, because they're more open about their parents having these conversations with their children to educate them right, and be sex positive and safe, they are less likely to engage in sexual acts even as 18 years old. I mean, it happens, but a lot of them kind of hold off because they're not curious. They're not trying to find, because they already have information. So they have more autonomy over, well, I already know what to expect. I already know that what's safe, what isn't. And they're more likely to even hold off. And then when they do start a relationship and they do engage in sexual acts, it's usually in a very committed relationship where both partners are consenting to things, they're respecting of each other, and they happen to even stay in these relationships longer. But these people talk to their children in this part of the world, which I cannot remember where. They talk to their children as young as 3 and 4 about these things. Not like when you tell people you got to be talking about your kids about sex, they're not giving them graphics at that age.
And I think there's a lot of misconception, right? If you talk to your kid about how to wear a condom, then you're telling them to go and have sex. We're talking about prevention. We're talking about educating themselves and learning and understanding, because they're going to have life situations where like, oh, wait, this is what is this for? And this is what it means. So actually, no, I don't want it.
Right. Like
Right.
they have that in their toolkit and they can choose, and they can probably choose wisely because they don't have the need to find out for themselves. They already know. Talking to your young children can just be as simple as like, this is a good touch, this is a bad touch. You can say no to people if you don't want to kiss or you don't want to hug. Your little friend is good to you, great. She wants a kiss, you don't want it, okay, that's okay. Like that's, you know what I mean? That's the type of conversations that happen when they're young. And that is something that I'm really super passionate about, Muriel, because especially this ties back to religion. Because we grow up thinking that our pastor or preacher or spiritual leader is right all the time, no matter what, there's a lot of abuse happening in the churches. A lot of abuse. And if it comes out to light, it's the victim's fault, because this perfect, saintly person could not possibly, right, be capable of those things unless the devil used you, the victim, to try to get to them. Mm-hmm. And that was my experience. So many, and you name them, Muriel, young, old, were taking advantage of me And because I was taught, first of all, culturally, las niñas bonitas, las niñas calladitas se ven más bonitas, number one, right? Good girls don't talk back. Good girls, good kids in general, they don't say no. They listen and they follow all the rules, right? And then already being in a home where I had an alcoholic father and I was learning to like control my environment and I didn't want to piss off anybody. And then, so I have all that already against me. Then you throw me, you know, in an environment where this type of religion, toxic religion exists. I mean, I was the perfect target, and I was forced to continue attending these places because they made a mistake, but nobody, Muriel, ever sat down to say what they did to you was wrong. They are wrong. How do you feel? Nobody asked me that. Nobody. There's very severe extreme cases and they get away with it because they hide under the umbrella of religion.
Yes, definitely.
It's so sad.
It happens all the time. And like I said, I grew up in the Christian church, so I know the Bible back and forth. So, and I remember having a client that, and even my mom talked about this a few times, where she wouldn't divorce my dad, that he was also an alcoholic. He's a whole different man now, because the Bible didn't allow that. The only reason that they could divorce if it was some type of adultery happening, right? Cheating. Otherwise, divorce was off the table. It was not an option for you. So we're talking about normalizing domestic violence. And my mom went through domestic violence, maybe not the physical, but my dad was very psychologically abusive towards her, very verbally abusive, but my mom was a very strong woman. She was a detective back in Peru. So she will never allow him to put a hand on her. But all the words that he said, she was okay with that because, pray on it.
And or he's not putting his hand on me, so then that's okay.
And what society is going to change if you get a divorce. So growing up in that environment and having this religion, these people from church support that, it was like, but you don't see my mom in tears. You don't see the things that I'm seeing at home. So how can you tell me
stress, the overwhelm?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how can you tell me just to pray and hope for the best? Like, when is the best happening?
Right.
Tell me we're not allowed to be mad at God. We can be mad. So yeah. Again, the very what's the word the influence that the religion has on you. I'm not talking about faith. I'm talking about the religion.
Mm-hmm.
The influence that has an individual. It shapes your self-esteem, your self-value, your self-worth. It shapes the type of relationships you're going to have with other people. How assertive or not assertive you're going to be, how you're going to be able to communicate. So it really shifts many things in you as an individual. So if you're not being in a healthy environment, because there are churches that are good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say that.
Yeah, and their leaders definitely are seeking for the best for their church members. Yeah.
Of course, but it takes there are not so many of them. They're not. Mm-hmm. They're not. Unfortunately, they're not. And if you go against, if my mom hears this podcast, she will be so upset, and she's always mad at me when I talk
Hi, Mom. We love moms.
This is my experience.
Yeah.
This is my experience. For her, finding a church was her support system. She felt seen, she felt heard, and I'm not going to take that away from her.
Yeah.
That's her whole identity.
It's our community, and we all need that.
I will never take that identity away from my mom. And I always tell her, like, I respect what you do. I respect, because you are definitely, you could be a little bit extremist, but you are a good Christian. I'm not going to say you're the type of people that I have experienced, would I have negative experience, but all you do, all the things that you see are through that lens. So when it doesn't fit that criteria, I become a bad daughter. I'm not being a good parent. So you're no longer my mom. I'm no
Mm-hmm.
longer talking to my mom at this point,
Yeah.
because we're driving through a different lens and there's no space for compassion. There's no space for empathy. There's no space for tolerance, respect, because we're just driving through that lens where it doesn't fit my box. Therefore, you're a bad person. You're not a good Christian. You're going to go to hell and all these bad things are going to happen to you.
Yeah.
And that's
Which,
what really like gets me where we need to stop doing that to our children.
yeah, we like you said, the black and white. Like there's all this gray area that we should embrace because if again, if this is the faith that you or the belief system that you follow, like God should feel like a freeing experience, right? And that connection to him should be about
Mhm.
you know me, Heavenly Father, and you know these contradictions within me. Let me take them to you safely and freely. And I believe that that's what is meant to happen. But then we have these structures put down by men who I believe at the core comes down to machismo and the patriarchy and manipulation and control. And then they just want to take the beauty of what faith could be, right? And they just establish these ugly traditions and beliefs and practices. And you're like, then you have people stepping away from something that, like you said, for instance, your mom can bring them community and spaces to like be with other people and medicine, right? And so like, but then they're so afraid to go back to that
Mhm.
they're like you're stripping away from them opportunities of being with others and healing as well.
And it's such a great influence because, we become acceptance of the things that are happening around the world, political stuff, you're very conservative, Republican because of your religion beliefs. So it definitely influences every aspect of your life, So we keep creating this very small, isolated place for this individual that cannot blossom because they're bombarded with you're not supposed to do this and you're supposed to do this type of person and you need to do that. So we're constantly driving under this survival mechanism and we're masking. So when we come to therapy,
That's what
we
we're doing. Yeah.
this mask. It's like, then who am I?
Yeah.
Who is this person without all this masking, without all these perceptions, where they have taught me to be this way. But there's a part of me that keeps fighting that I don't want to do it. I don't want to be, I want to be this person, but this person is ugly and it's going to go to hell and it's not going to be living a good life. So it's
Yeah.
very conflicted. It's a lot of internal confliction there the individual goes through as they're healing for that religion trauma.
You were talking right now about how that shapes you as a political person or not. So my husband's ex-military, he retired not long ago. And we went down to the base to the store in there. And they have a bunch of little shops. And obviously, a lot of the things you see there are geared towards military, right? Because that's who's there shopping. There was this shirt that I was like, I think they missed what the Bible said, like entirely. The graphic on it said, my religion mentions arms. And there was like the AR-15s on the shirt with a Bible in the middle. And I'm like, what a perfect representation of what religion at the hands and the lens of a human being can do. Because I'm sure that's not what Jesus said. I'm sure when he said, "You guys are armed with my Holy Spirit," I don't think he was talking about about AR-15s. But it's so twisted, and I always tell the kids anytime that we get an opportunity to go to some church, which I recently went to in Michigan, and it was a good experience. It was a good experience there. It was different for sure, but before that, I would always say there is a level of, I guess, just respect within that community, right? Like you respect everyone, you respect one another. Don't ever place your eyes on whomever the spiritual leader is. Don't ever put him up on a pedestal because that in itself is going to set you up for like the biggest disappointment. you always have to realize that they're human beings trying, some of them, right? Because some don't care. Some just completely take advantage of the authority they have. But some of them truly want to do good. And some of them are really struggling daily battles to do whatever it is they feel their beliefs tell them to do, right? But in the end, they're human beings. They're human beings. They're no better than you. You're no better than them. It's just do the best you can. And give yourself grace, because God, if you believe in God, extends his grace out to you. Why are we going to allow people to take that away from us?
Yes. And I think it's very individual, very private, that relationship that you carry with the higher power.
Mm-hmm.
Because one thing that I always comes to mind when we talk about that is how ugly and unfortunate your life will be without the Lord, without going to church, without community, finding your church community. I haven't been in church in 10 years plus 10 years. So I just don't believe in church. I don't believe in their religion. I believe in the higher power. And I keep telling my mom, well, I'm still blessed. I'm very successful. I'm going to school. I could say I'm really happy with my life, very acceptance of the ugly and the not so good parts of me. And that's something that I have learned on my own time, maybe with my connection with the higher power and going to therapy, but never loved myself how I love myself now compared to back then when I was going to church.
Yeah,
You know,
I believe
and
that.
you cannot take away from me because that's my own experience.
Yeah.
So being able to say, yeah, it's okay if you don't want to go to church, because your relationship with the higher power is never going to change. And we're still going to go through challenges because that's just part of life. Going through challenges, difficult situations doesn't mean that I'm not in good terms with God,
Right.
what's but those are the things that we learn, you
Yeah.
know um like really quick, my
Yeah.
son, he has a struggle with his health, and there was a time in life where he was hospitalized, and the first thing my mom said to me, and I love my mom, yeah, we have a better relationship now, but the
Mm-hmm.
first thing she said to me when my son was sick is, what are you doing with your life, and your relationship with God that is affecting your son? So blaming me that because there was some misconnection with God, with my religion, with my faith, it was doing, lingering to my son's health. And that was so
Wow.
hurtful for me
Yeah.
because I carry a lot of guilt for many years that I worked
I'm
through it.
sorry. I'm sorry that that was said to
But
you.
those are things that were taught, and I was like, I was very resented to my mom. But then I learned, that's all she knows. And I learned to see her through different lens, when my mom says things like that, it's like, okay, it's not her, it's her religion that is speaking. It's
Yeah.
all she knows, but it took me years of therapy to get over that.
Yeah, that's very hard.
So and it's just one of the few things that I have with my mom when it comes to religion and all the hurtful things that both of my parents have inflicted, but it takes time. I have to heal. I have to go through my own suffering. I have to accept things that happen to me, and I had to learn ways to cope with that and be able to continue with my life in order to be in that point where I'm comfortable talking to my both of my parents, having a better relationship, because it might not be the healthiest, but a better relationship with them, because I had access to a therapist that talked to me and gave me the space to talk about these things,
Yeah,
because
with no judgment and no guilt. Yeah.
yes, we don't
Yeah.
get that. I feel like in church, every time I brought up a problem, it's like, well, let's just pray and
Right.
let's reflect on our own lives of why these bad things are happening to you. And I was like, okay, so
And
you're
you're like, trust me, I do not want any of this. And I am doing so much reflecting and it won't stop.
you know
Yeah.
so it's painful. Religion trauma, it's really painful. It lingers on how you see yourself, how you create connections with people, how you raise your own child. There's so many things that I had to unlearn, and I was able to learn again to be a better mom, to be very open about having these conversations and very acceptance of things, because I grew up old school.
Yeah.
I was living under that lens where if I step away from church, I'm going to go to hell and all these bad things are going to happen to me. And I was wild. I did so many things because I
It's
just wanted
natural.
to.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that's just, I'm not surprised that happens. Like that happened to me, because it was like everything was wrong. Everything was a sin. And then you feel like you're a horrible person. And I mean, and not like to say that this is an excuse, but at some point you're like, well, crap, everything I do is wrong. Let me just have a good time while I'm at it. You know what I mean?
Right?
But because also that extreme behavior of just completely letting go can also bring so much harm. That's why, I also don't recommend it, right? Like that's why if we can have these spaces, and as parents, if we can do this for our children so that they don't have the need to escape you and your crazy ideas about religion or God or creation or whatever, and you're not giving them the opportunity to express themselves freely and still be loved and supported. Like that way they don't go off and do wild things and then eventually be like, wow, that was not the best way to go about that. You know what I mean? I'm not proud of a lot of the things I did, but in a way it's like, it's gotten me here. You know what I mean? It's gotten me here. Thank God nothing crazier, because crazy things happen, but nothing that I couldn't come out from happened, but let's not do that for our kids. And then let's not roll the dice and be like, well, hopefully they come out of it. Like, let's just set them up a little bit better than we did.
Yes.
So with this in mind, for someone maybe struggling with that, whether still in the church or without, let's say maybe they don't have access to a therapist or a counselor or a safe space of that sort. What would be a good maybe first step for them to do or to think about if they're struggling with this?
And this is a great question, and unfortunately for this type of trauma, you definitely need a therapist, a professional to help you through that. But I think the first step is to accept that you have experienced trauma, religious trauma, and to
Yeah.
normalize and validate the things that you're feeling, that you're experiencing. Because the moment we accept it, we validate it, it comes that accountability, right? Where what can I do to change this? What can I do to make myself, love myself more, provide more compassion for myself? Because we're still driving with that survival mechanism where I need to do A, B, C, and D, or otherwise I'm not going to be able to survive. Or we are isolating. We're not talking to people. We're finding unhealthy ways to cope. So I think this is one of the things that we definitely need a professional to talk about it, to create the space. It is difficult, but if you don't have access to that, normalizing what you're feeling, accepting that these things really happen to you and you're not alone. Other
Yeah.
people have experienced the same situations. So being able to normalize it, validate it, accept it, little by little, it's going to give you that accountability of, okay, now what do I do next? Because now that I know, now that I see it, it's very overwhelming, and I need to find a way to release it in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Because the drinking is not doing it anymore. The isolating, the getting angry, upset, and aggressive is not doing it anymore. We need to find other ways to do it.
Yeah. True. We could go into this so much
Definitely.
more. So maybe, what do you think about continuing on this and maybe another aspect of
Oh yeah.
religious trauma
Hmm.
on
Or maybe the
on our
first
next.
questions after
Yeah,
this.
let's ask questions and then possibly touch on a different area because there's so many interconnections, there's so many like layers, and oh, it gets nasty. It gets nasty and overwhelming, but yeah, I think like you said, understanding you're not alone. If you're feeling these things, you're not crazy.
Hmm.
It's okay if people around you are dismissing them. May this conversation be the validation you need to take
Yeah.
that first step.
Yes. Amen to that.
Yes.
Definitely.
And you are worthy and loved and supported. Reach
Yes.
out to us if you need to.
And there are support groups, right? There
Yeah.
are free support groups online with people that have experienced religion trauma in different levels. So never minimize your trauma, never compare it to somebody else. Everybody's experience is unique,
Yeah.
and we're here to address that, not to compare, well, this didn't happen to you, so you shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z. Religion trauma, it's little t's and big t's, and everything is accepted, everything is validated. We will never minimize your experience. So finding those support groups are really helpful to talk to other people about it in a sense where we are tolerating and accepting and validating what you're feeling instead of, well, you're wrong. So that's the
Yeah.
beauty of support groups, that we're there to support each other, to talk to each other, to bring that check-ins that are so important, to have that outlet, that positive outlet that we can go and talk about how we're feeling.
Yeah. Freely. Yeah.
And also understanding that sometimes this trauma could take you to a very dark place and you can become suicidal, or you might have a lot of self-harm situation. So there's hotlines, there's support, you're not alone. It happens a lot where
Mm-hmm.
suicide ideation comes after a severe trauma or realizing that you went to a trauma where you find that your life has no meaning. So being able to understand that your life means something all the
Yeah.
time. That your life is worthy, and seeking for support, calling the hotline, something near your location. I know you're in Texas, I'm in California, so things change per state. So being able to find some resources as well with the national hotline for suicide as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, because I can attest to that. I think when I had a big realization of like how did this happen? Because I think the feeling was how did I allow this to happen? We immediately like turn it inward, right? Like why did I allow this to happen? It feels like that's when you spiral almost out of control because you like question everything, you're self-sabotaging, there's the guilt, you know what I mean? But the whirlwind of emotions eventually does come to an end, and you can think clearly and just take it down step by step, and you will
Yeah.
come out of that. And then I think it's also important that if maybe you are listening to this conversation and perhaps you've been the cause of that religious trauma for someone else, that maybe this is a good time to reflect on, right? How extreme am I being and how much of a burden am I putting on others because of my extreme religious beliefs?
At some point, we do that. We become that one person.
Yeah, and we don't realize it. I do have to say that a lot of people usually mean well. Like, for instance, our moms, right? They really mean well. And this really does come from a place of wanting us to do better, to be saved, to not maybe go through the same experiences they went through. And because they found this, religion that fulfills that in some way, they want, and they feel safe, whether we
Yeah.
agree with it or not. Maybe they want us to feel that. So I know that a lot of people mean well because they love us, but let's keep that on check a little bit.
Yes, definitely. And understanding that what well is to them might not be for you.
Right.
And that's okay, because
Yeah.
some people think that forcing you to do these things means well. but they're also coming from that religion trauma. That's all they know.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
and a lot of people get upset when I say this, but this is part of the whole decolonization process that we need to go through, because religion came to our homes when colonization happened.
And it came through violence, through
Came through
force.
force.
It wasn't a good, positive, beautiful experience. It was the result of violence and forceful entrance into our lives.
Well, brujas, we were burned alive, and it was very detaching us really drastically away from our ancestrals' belief, our customs, our values, because we had our own ways to connect with the higher power. We just have different names, but because it was new to them, and again, part of that colonization, as we were colonized, all of that was taken away from us.
Yeah, it was a control and manipulative tool as well. There's a lot of negative things that were attached to that when it came to us through colonization. It would have been a whole different thing if this came and it was presented in a beautiful, organic, and like it's
Yeah.
open if you want to experience this kind of thing. But that's not the case.
That's it was very violent. It
Yes.
was very, very violent. So being understandable of that as well, that's something that we have been taught for years. And when we talk about que nos pasen el huevo, que el palo santo, que el sage, it's like, ¿cómo puedes creer en esas cosas? Te vas a ir al infierno. But that's what our ancestors used to do. This is
Yeah.
what we
And
do,
it's
and it was
and it's
beautiful.
also okay if you are like, that's not for me. That's cool. I guess like the highlight of this conversation is that if you are safely practicing something, do it, embrace it. If you
Mhm.
want to share it with other people because it excites you and you're passionate about it, great. But if they don't want to accept it, it's okay too. You can continue practicing whatever you want as long as you're not harming yourself or others, right? So, like, that's the whole idea. Like, nobody wants to take these practices and beliefs from you. It's just like we don't have to force it on anybody, and we don't have to like feel like if we're feeling guilt when we're practicing these things, maybe that's not the right thing for us either.
Yeah,
And it's okay to question that.
definitely. Yes.
Well, this was a beautiful conversation as always, Muriel. Thank you so much. And we are going to pick up on the next recording because this is like so much, so much.
A lot. So if you have any questions, reach out to Yuli, let her know, and
Hmm.
then we go from there. We go from
Yeah,
there because this is a very wide topic.
very.
There's so many layers about religion trauma. And because with trauma, and I talk about it on the lens of abuse, you get abused through religion very physically, emotionally, psychologically, financially. So it's a very nasty relationship. And again, I'm going to get a lot of fire back because of this, but it is what it is. So yeah, ask questions and maybe we can jump into those questions and see what's the main theme and
And
go
then
with
go
that.
from there. Okie doke.
Mhm.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much. We're going to be in touch until the next time.
All right.